In a politically charged atmosphere, the recent confrontation between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and former U.S. President Donald Trump during a high-stakes Oval Office meeting has sent shockwaves through Washington. The incident occurred as Zelensky sought to finalize a significant agreement that would grant the United States access to Ukraine's mineral wealth, a deal intended to bolster support for Ukraine amid ongoing Russian aggression. However, the exchange has instead sparked a contentious debate among lawmakers, raising questions about the future of U.S. support for Ukraine. Historically, Ukraine has enjoyed bipartisan backing from Congress, but the dynamics appear to be shifting. The fallout from the meeting has prompted a divide among Republicans, with many expressing displeasure towards Zelensky. "What I saw in the Oval Office was disrespectful, and I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelensky again," lamented Senator Lindsey Graham, a longtime supporter of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio praised Trump for his assertive stance, stating, "Thank you at POTUS for standing up for America in a way that no president has ever had the courage to do before. America is with you." Conversely, some Republican lawmakers who have been critical of U.S. aid to Ukraine seized the moment to commend Trump's confrontational approach. "Not another penny," declared Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas, reflecting a growing faction within the GOP that is wary of further financial commitments to Ukraine. Representative Andy Biggs of Arizona went so far as to label Zelensky a dictator and supported Trump's harsh treatment during the meeting. On the Democratic side, the response was swift and unequivocal. Democratic leaders condemned the Oval Office encounter as damaging to U.S. foreign policy and detrimental to Ukraine's struggle against Russian aggression. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer articulated the party's stance, asserting that Trump and Vance were doing Putin's dirty work. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries echoed similar sentiments, calling the meeting appalling and warning that it would embolden Putin. The bipartisan discord stems not only from the heated exchange but also from the broader implications it carries for U.S. foreign policy. With the conflict in Ukraine entering another year, there is a palpable sense of urgency among legislators to maintain support for Kyiv. However, the fallout from the meeting has ignited fears that U.S. backing could dwindle, particularly among Republicans who are increasingly questioning the rationale behind continued financial assistance. A bad day for America's foreign policy, noted Representative Don Bacon, emphasizing the need for a clear stance on supporting democratic values. The ramifications of this incident extend beyond immediate political posturing. Analysts observe that it may signal a turning point in U.S. engagement with Ukraine as lawmakers grapple with domestic pressures and shifting public sentiment regarding foreign aid. With the 2026 midterms on the horizon, both parties are acutely aware of the need to balance constituent concerns with international obligations. As Zelensky continues to navigate the complexities of U.S. politics, the future of Ukraine's relationship with the United States hangs in the balance. The potential for bipartisan support exists, yet it hinges on a delicate interplay of diplomacy, public opinion, and party dynamics. Looking ahead, the next steps taken by both the Biden administration and Congress will be critical in determining whether U.S. support for Ukraine can be sustained or if the contentious atmosphere will lead to a significant policy shift. In the coming months, all eyes will be on Washington as lawmakers respond to the fallout from the Oval Office clash and its implications for U.S. foreign policy. The stakes are high, and as the war in Ukraine continues, the need for a united front against aggression remains paramount. In the evolving landscape of American politics, the stark divisions within the Republican Party are becoming increasingly evident, particularly as figures like Representative Thomas Massie emerge as lone voices against the party's prevailing fiscal strategies. Meanwhile, international dynamics are shifting under the weight of President Donald Trump's controversial foreign policy, as illustrated by his recent meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Together, these narratives highlight the complexities and challenges facing both domestic governance and international relations under a renewed Trump administration. This week Massey, a Kentucky Republican known for his libertarian leanings, stood out as the sole dissenting voice during a House vote on the budget resolution that will add approximately $3 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade. In a political landscape where most GOP members have aligned with Trump's fiscal policies, often criticized for prioritizing tax cuts without corresponding spending reductions, Massey's steadfast opposition underscores a growing concern over the party's direction. "We have no plan whatsoever to balance the budget other than growth, but what they're proposing is to make the deficit worse," Massey stated, calling attention to the lack of accountability within his party. His resistance to the current fiscal trajectory poses a challenge to Republican leadership, particularly as the party navigates the pressures of maintaining unity while facing a substantial budget deficit. Simultaneously, the implications of Trump's foreign policy were thrust into the spotlight during his recent meeting with Zelensky in the Oval Office. This encounter, described by observers as a blend of high-stakes geopolitics and reality television, raises critical questions about the future of U.S.-Ukraine relations and America's role on the global stage. The meeting's outcomes may have far-reaching consequences, particularly as Trump appears to diminish the traditional alliances and norms that have defined U.S. foreign policy since World War II. As noted by analysts, Trump's approach could signify a departure from established diplomatic practices, favoring a transactional style that aligns more closely with authoritarian leaders like Putin and Xi Jinping. The concerns among Republican donors about the administration's chaotic early actions reflect a growing unease within the party. Many are reconsidering investments and expressing skepticism about the sustainability of Trump's policies, particularly as federal layoffs loom and tariffs threaten to increase operational costs across various sectors. The recent market fluctuations with declines in major U.S. indices further illustrate the potential volatility accompanying Trump's economic approach, which prioritizes nationalism over global cooperation. As Europe grapples with the implications of a shifting U.S. stance, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is set to convene a meeting of European leaders aiming to address the emerging challenges posed by the so-called Trump world order. The narrative surrounding this new geopolitical framework is complex, as experts warn of a diminishing role for traditional alliances like NATO and a potential erosion of the West's unified front against authoritarianism. Ultimately, the interplay between Massey's fiscal conservatism and Trump's unpredictable foreign policy presents a dual challenge for the Republican Party and the global community. The path forward is fraught with uncertainty, and as the administration continues to redefine its priorities, the stakes for both domestic governance and international relations have never been higher. Observers are left to ponder whether Trump's second term will usher in a new era of governance characterized by isolationism and economic turmoil, or if it will pave the way for renewed dialogue and cooperation on the world stage. As the political landscape unfolds, the outcomes of these critical debates will shape not only the future of the Republican Party but also the broader geopolitical order. As the political landscape in Minnesota shifts, anticipation builds around the upcoming U.S. Senate race, particularly following the unexpected retirement announcement of Senator Tina Smith. With Democrats historically holding the seat since 2009, Smith's departure has opened the door for renewed competition, prompting both parties to recalibrate their strategies as they gear up for what could be a pivotal contest in the 2026 midterm elections. Senator Smith's exit has stirred an enthusiasm for candidacies on both sides of the aisle. Democrats who have enjoyed a stronghold in statewide elections for over a decade are now faced with the challenge of defending a seat that was previously considered safe. In this environment, where there are a limited number of pickup opportunities, I anticipate that this will be a contested race and that both sides will have to significantly invest, noted Norm Coleman, Minnesota's last Republican senator. His assertion reflects a growing belief among Republicans that the seat is indeed competitive. Minnesota's political heavyweights have already begun to position themselves for a potential run. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan has emerged as a prominent Democratic contender, and several notable figures including Representatives Angie Craig and Ilhan Omar as well as Attorney General Keith Ellison are also considering entering the race. The prospect of a bid from David Wellstone, son of the late Senator Paul Wellstone, adds another layer of complexity to the Democratic landscape. Despite these developments, Governor Tim Walz has ruled out a run, narrowing the field of potential candidates. Democrats remain cautiously optimistic about their chances in a midterm climate that could act as a referendum on former President Donald Trump's ongoing influence. "I don't think we can be cocky about our past record," cautioned Corey Day, a former executive director of the Democratic Farmer-Labor Party. He emphasized the need for vigilance, recalling recent electoral setbacks that have shaken the party's confidence. On the Republican side, there is a palpable sense of urgency. While they have not won a statewide race since 2006, party leaders are hopeful that the right candidate, combined with robust support from national GOP organizations, could shift the balance of power. The National Republican Senatorial Committee has already marked Smith's seat as a target, reinforcing the notion that both parties will need to invest heavily to secure victory. Among the early Republican hopefuls are retired Navy SEAL Adam Schwartz and Royce White, who previously ran against Senator Amy Klobuchar. The endorsement process, however, remains a contentious issue within the party. Last year's endorsement of White by grassroots conservatives faced dismissal from national leaders, raising concerns about party unity moving forward. Potential candidates like Michelle Tafoya and state senators Julia Coleman and Karen Housley are also eyeing the race, but their ability to resonate with both grassroots supporters and the party establishment may ultimately determine their success. As the GOP navigates its candidate selection, challenges loom large. The absence of strong congressional contenders such as Representative Tom Emmer and Representative Pete Stauber, who have opted not to run, raises questions about the party's viability in the upcoming election. Almost 2 years before the election is going to take place, the folks that would historically be considered the strongest candidates have all said they won't do it practically, remarked former DFL chair Mike Erlandson, suggesting a potential lack of enthusiasm among top-tier candidates. Political analysts such as University of Minnesota's Larry Jacobs urge caution, noting that many factors could influence the race in the coming months. The likelihood that Donald Trump is going to be unpopular, perhaps significantly unpopular, by the time the midterm elections roll around is real, Jacobs stated, indicating that external conditions could sway voter sentiment significantly. In this evolving narrative, the stakes for both parties are high. As the political chess match continues, the outcome of this Senate race may not only determine the future of Minnesota's representation but could also signal broader trends ahead of the 2026 midterms. With nearly 2 years remaining until the election, both Democrats and Republicans are poised for a fierce battle, one that will undoubtedly shape the political landscape for years to come. In a political landscape increasingly defined by budgetary constraints and fiscal debates, the upcoming address by former President Donald Trump is poised to capture significant attention. Scheduled for Tuesday, March 4, 2025, Trump's remarks will likely reflect his administration's ongoing economic policies and budgetary priorities, particularly in light of recent developments in Congress. With a backdrop of a newly passed budget framework by House Republicans, which includes substantial spending cuts and tax proposals, observers are keen to discern how Trump will navigate these complex issues. At the heart of the latest budget discussions is a proposal that aims to extend the tax cuts initiated during Trump's first term while also introducing new tax incentives. This plan, costing an estimated $4.5 trillion over the next decade, has sparked fervent debate among lawmakers. U.S. Representative Ashley Hinson of Iowa has been vocal in supporting the budget framework, asserting that Republicans are committed to protecting vulnerable populations while simultaneously addressing concerns surrounding Medicaid. "We want to protect the most vulnerable," Hinson stated during a recent press call, emphasizing that the focus should be on eliminating fraud rather than cutting essential benefits. However, the proposal has drawn criticism from both Democrats and moderate Republicans, who argue that significant cuts to Medicaid and other social services could compromise critical support systems for many Americans. The plan includes $880 billion in cuts from the Energy and Commerce Committee, raising concerns about how such reductions will impact individuals relying on these programs. Hinson's assurances that we're not going to be cutting people's benefits echo a sentiment shared by many Republicans who face the challenge of reconciling fiscal conservatism with the need to maintain essential services. As the budget process unfolds, it remains to be seen how Trump's address will address these pressing issues. His previous tenure was marked by a strong emphasis on tax reform and deregulation, themes likely to re-emerge in his speech. The political environment is further complicated by the recent electoral outcomes where Trump reclaimed the presidency and Republicans regained control of the Senate, setting the stage for a potentially contentious legislative session. In the lead-up to his address, analysts are speculating about the themes Trump may emphasize. With the House still grappling with uncalled races, such as those in key districts across California and Iowa, the potential for discord within the party could influence his messaging. The ongoing discussions about reducing the federal budget deficit and concerns over a debt spiral could also feature prominently, particularly as Trump seeks to rally support among Republicans and reassure constituents about the administration's fiscal responsibility. Looking ahead, Trump's forthcoming address may serve as a pivotal moment in solidifying GOP priorities under his leadership. As the political landscape continues to evolve, the implications of this budget proposal and the responses from both parties could shape the legislative trajectory for the remainder of the year. Ultimately, whether the Republicans can navigate these complexities while upholding their promises to constituents will be a key factor in their political strategy moving forward. In a significant legal battle that underscores the tensions between the executive and judicial branches of the U.S. government, foreign aid organizations are appealing to the Supreme Court to uphold a lower court's order requiring the Trump administration to release frozen funds for international assistance programs. This issue has emerged as a focal point of contention following President Trump's sweeping freeze on foreign aid shortly after taking office, which has left many aid groups in precarious financial situations. On March 2, 2025, lawyers representing these organizations filed a response to the Supreme Court arguing against the government's request to overturn a compliance order issued by a federal judge. The government comes to this court with an emergency of its own making, the lawyers asserted, illustrating the dire consequences of the administration's actions. They highlighted that the freeze has led to layoffs and operational halts within companies and nonprofits that have long partnered with the government to provide crucial assistance worldwide. The urgency of this situation is palpable, with the plaintiffs emphasizing that the consequences of the funding freeze extend beyond financial distress to imminent humanitarian crises. Meanwhile, many of those who depend on the assistance face starvation, disease, and death, they stated, emphasizing the real-world impact of bureaucratic delays. The legal confrontation has gained momentum since a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to suspend the funding freeze, setting a compliance deadline that the government failed to meet. In a swift response, Chief Justice John Roberts paused the order just hours before the deadline, seeking further arguments from the aid groups. The Justice Department contends that the compliance timeline is not logistically or technically feasible, framing the issue as one of executive authority in foreign affairs. Acting Solicitor General Sarah Harris argued that the president's powers are at their peak in matters of foreign policy, suggesting that judicial oversight could overstep constitutional boundaries. As the Supreme Court prepares to deliberate on this complex case, the broader context reveals a judicial landscape increasingly fraught with challenges to the Trump administration's actions. Reports indicate that the administration is currently facing over 100 lawsuits, with many judges issuing temporary restraining orders against executive actions that critics argue overstep legal authority. Notably, several judges who have ruled against the administration were appointed by Republican presidents, indicating that the judiciary's pushback is not strictly a partisan affair. The ramifications of these legal disputes are extensive, affecting not only the administration's policy implementation but also raising questions about the integrity of democratic institutions. For instance, recent rulings have blocked initiatives such as the relocation of transgender women inmates to men's prisons and cuts to federal funding for hospitals providing gender transition treatment. As legal disputes unfold, the administration's apparent reluctance to comply with court directives has led to accusations of flouting judicial orders, intensifying the conflict between branches of government. The stakes are high as the outcome of these legal battles could redefine the limits of presidential authority and the judiciary's role in checking executive power. As observers await the Supreme Court's decision on the foreign aid issue, the situation remains fluid with potential implications for the administration's broader agenda. The legal landscape will undoubtedly continue to evolve as both sides prepare for a protracted struggle over the balance of power in American governance, raising the prospect of a constitutional crisis that could reverberate through the nation's political fabric.